The following is an exclusive presentation of Blaze Sports.
Welcome back. It's time for another episode of Blaze Game Day. I am one of your hosts, Parker Porrill. I'm joined with Alan Judson and Aidan O'Neill, and we're back at the studio unpacking the game of the week this week. And we have one of our broadcasters going on the road, Alan Judson, for Arizona State taking on Utah on the road. It should be a great game in Salt Lake City. And we've had great game after great game, it seems, for Arizona State taking on, whether it be TCU, Baylor, Big 12 play. It's a really competitive conference this year. And Coach Dillingham talked about in his press conference. It seems like every four-game stretch you look at on Arizona State's schedule, it's hard game after hard game. This team could easily, you could tell me they could go 0-4 in the next stretch, or you could tell me they could go 4-0. You could tell me they could go 2-2. That's how hard this Arizona State schedule is, and we're here to break it down for you. Alan, when you see this Arizona State-Utah game from the get-go, what's your first immediate thoughts?
Yeah, this is the Devils' relief from their Texas teams. This is the only game from Game 3 to Game 7 where they're not playing a team from Texas. Game 3 to Game 8, actually. So this is the only team. They've already beaten the three teams from Texas, Texas State, Baylor, TCU. I think the big thing I see is momentum. I think Arizona State has a lot of momentum with the close games that they've played, but coming out victorious in back-to-back weeks. Both teams coming off bye weeks, which is going to be big, and then the Utes kind of got stomped their last time home by Texas Tech. They're playing another ranked opponent in ASU, although not as highly ranked as Texas Tech was. I'm intrigued, I would say, is the biggest thing. I think it's going to be a great game.
And Utah also looked very human against West Virginia. West Virginia ended up losing 48-14, and I know that says, like, oh, they looked human. What do you mean? It was a competitive 48-14 game. I don't know if y'all had similar thoughts. I felt like West Virginia had flashes, and not to say that this Utah team isn't competitive. They definitely have the weapons, but they seem to come through in weird moments, and we kind of saw it in that Texas Tech game where it was slow and sluggish, and finally at the end, Texas Tech just had too much momentum.
Yeah, no doubt. And Utah, too, the one thing when I look at their schedule, they haven't necessarily beat anybody yet. So it's kind of hard to gauge where they're at as a program. You start with UCLA, blowout win, Cal Poly, Wyoming, and then their one true test, which was at home against Texas Tech. That, for me, was going to be the benchmark. I'm going to gauge now where this team is going to be at moving forward. And they lost in blowout fashion. They didn't compete. Devin Dampier looked rough for the majority of that game. And they pick up a win against West Virginia on the road, but they're widely considered one of the worst teams in the Big 12. So Arizona State's going to possess a different challenge. If this game was in Tempe, I feel like everybody would be on ASU. A lot of people still will be on ASU, even though it's in Utah. But the biggest thing will be, how is Utah going to look against a team that is quite competent when they haven't played relatively anybody just yet in the season?
This is Utah's. Utah has quite the four-game stretch, or the past four-game stretch, I should say, going back to that Texas Tech game. They had number 17 Red Raiders going into town. They lost 34-10. Then they took on West Virginia, a little more of a checkup game, 48-14. And then after that, Arizona State, of course, and then at BYU, the Holy War, which Alan knows a lot about. And it is a tough schedule for Utah upcoming, and it feels like if they can take down Arizona State, even if they lose to BYU, it's still a hard schedule to end the year, but they're right back in the race for that Big 12 championship.
I will tell you, Parker, I think if Utes fans and Utes players could pick a game to win, I don't think they'd pick Arizona State out of those two. That game in BYU, that would be – I know Utah fans and their players, that would be their quote-unquote Super Bowl, to walk out of LaVell Edwards Stadium with an upset victory of their rival, especially after what happened last year. But going back to this Arizona State game, I'm going to be interested to see how the fans show it. It's fall break for Utah this week, so people are just going to be coming back. But more importantly, when Utah's brought in these hyped games into LaVell Edwards Stadium, they've kind of been historically terrible. They lost by 24 to Texas Tech, and that was a much closer game than it looked like on paper. But in 2023, they brought the 8th-ranked Oregon Ducks into town, College Game Day, and they got stomped. Bryson Barnes threw for 130 yards, and Glover ran for 40 yards. That was Utah's offense that game. And then they go on the road to Washington, when they're on the road, they're great. They played Washington within a touchdown. I think that was the year Washington was, one of the best teams in the nation, went to the national title. But bringing these hyped games into Salt Lake, they have not been great outside of beating Caleb Williams a couple times. So I'm very interested to see how the fans show up, how they show out after the last time that the fans showed up and out at Rice Eccles. They kind of got embarrassed.
And we'll get into the actual strategy in our next segment. I know we wanted to talk about Utah's running game, but to quickly go back to that West Virginia game, we saw Utah actually crank it up in the passing game. 532 total yards, 290 passing yards with 242 on the ground. And you look at that loss to Texas Tech, Utah, they averaged 4.3 yards per pass, only 162 passing yards to 101 rushing yards. And you go back to that West Virginia game, Utah averaged 9.7 yards per pass. Like, you talk about a cataclysmic reversal. Utah seemed to have it going through the air, and they're, of course, led by Devin Dampier, who is a Phoenix, Arizona product, and Kenny Dillingham talked about missing out on him as a recruit, and he seems to be showing flashes, and he seemed to show that Texas Tech game, the mistakes that he made, they seem to just be simple mistakes, and he fixed against West Virginia. How do you think Dampier will match up, Aidan, to this Arizona State defense?
Well, Arizona State's pass rush at the beginning of this year was one of their weaknesses. It felt like they never could get home to the quarterback. But they figured something out against TCU. Prince Dorba had the game of his life with a strip sack laid on Josh Hoover. ASU ended up taking over that game. Their linebacking core is always very talented. That will be good at stopping the run. For Utah, Devin Dampier is going to have to push the ball vertically down the middle of the field and make big-time throws. And there hasn't been a moment yet this season where he has necessarily done that when he's had to. I look back to that Texas Tech game. Multiple times, Dampier had wide-open targets down the middle of the field, and he was unable to find them in stride. He's very elusive. He's a good quarterback with the read option, the triple option, as we mentioned before we went live. But his passing attack, that is what makes Utah so dangerous when everything is clicking for them. And Arizona State, their secondary has been a cause for concern. We look back to that Mississippi State game where Javen Robinson gets beat over the top to lose the game, and there's been plenty interchangeable parts. It's been an inconsistent unit. They also, if we're looking at Dampier, needs to do this for Utah for them to succeed. Arizona State's secondary is the X factor for them. What are they going to bring to the table in a game of this standard?
I think, just really quickly to butt in, the pass rush for Arizona State, they have a tall task. The Utes have allowed 3 sacks all season through 5 games. That's the 6th least in college football. So it's not going to be easy. You talked about the struggles for Dampier in that Texas Tech game. He wasn't really pressured. He got sacked once. Utah has a great offensive line. Prince Dorba, as you mentioned, had the game of his life. But Arizona State's defensive line is going to have to turn it up against a very, very good Utah offensive line.
Yeah, Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomo, they are highly touted prospects. Dillingham talked about in his press conference. You could be talking about 2 future first-round draft picks on that offensive line, and they're big guys. They bring a lot of power. It's going to be hard getting past them, and there's a reason they're highly touted, and I'm going to be really shocked if Arizona State is able to bring the pressure like we saw late in that TCU game, like we saw against Texas State, because this is the real comparison I see, the Arizona State versus Texas State, and how that can translate to this Utah Utes game. Because Utah, they have a similar build, I would say, to Texas State, because they have a more mobile quarterback, they have a flashy offense, but they also have a very physical defense. Now, obviously, Utah, a better program, has better athletes than Texas State, but I think the game plan might be more similar to what we saw in that Texas State game, and it all depends on that defensive line for me. How will the depth of ASU match up against the physicalness of this Utah Utes team?
Yeah, and when a team like Utah can run the ball, they're going to have to get home a couple of times on Devin Dampier just to keep him honest. And I look at a guy like Clayton Smith, too, where he feels like he's the engine of this team in a lot of games. When he's getting to the quarterback, the entire front seven is succeeding mightily. And for Prince Dorba, he ended up being the guy against TCU. But the defensive line, from the defensive perspective holistically with Arizona State, it's probably their second best unit. The linebackers have always fueled the entire defense, but they are going to need to do a lot more, as you mentioned. These are two outstanding offensive linemen that are getting national recognition from the jump. As you mentioned, could be 2 first-round picks. So it's a tall task, but it's one where ASU has to come out from the jump and succeed in the running game.
Yeah, Kenny Dillingham talked about the slow starts as well recently, and how they've been maybe deemed as a fourth-quarter team and a team that's come alive late, and they really have to get going fast against this Utah team, because if they can get to Dampier early, again, it's going to be tough, but if they can't, he's a guy who has a tendency to turn the ball over. He's had 12 passing touchdowns last year in New Mexico. He had as many interceptions. He's a guy who you can force, if he has to throw the ball vertically, he's a guy who you can force into some tough throws, and he has not shown quite yet that he can make them. But if you let him get out on his legs, that's when he beats you. If he can escape pressure, if he can get out of the pocket. So I would not be shocked if there's one, maybe 2 guys who are on a quarterback spy 75, 80% of the game to just watch Dampier. He is struggling with an ankle injury. He was struggling with an ankle injury leading into Tech, that is. He's kind of been deemed good to go as of now, but that could be something to watch.
Yes, and we will talk about this matchup more right after a break. But before we get to that, the touch up on the turnovers. Dampier, 3 interceptions. Sam Levitt also with 3, but 2 of those interceptions week 2 against Mississippi State. Levitt has played pretty clean ever since that Mississippi State loss, and Dampier, he had his struggles against Texas Tech, through an interception against West Virginia. We'll see how it matches up as we break down the strategy right after this break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on Blaze Game Day. Welcome back to Blaze Game Day. I'm Parker Porrill here with Alan Judson and Aidan O'Neill. We're going to break down the strategy of the game of the week between Arizona State and the Utah Utes. Should be a great game up in Salt Lake City. And to break down the strategy, I want to talk about the running game of Utah. We hinted at it in our first segment, but it is dangerous. And Alan, what do you think this Utah running game is capable of, and how do you think ASU can stop it?
Well, they're capable of the world, Parker. They average 242 rush yards per game. That's the 9th best mark in college football. That's the best in the Big 12. They've got a 2.5 three-headed monster at running back. Wayshawn Parker, the Washington State transfer, and Akari Rogers came over from New Mexico along with his quarterback and his offensive coordinator, Bryce Duke from Old Dominion. And then the two-way player who's been at Utah his whole career, Smith Snowden, has also been an impact in the run game. But when you look at the Arizona State side, this is where I'm also excited for this battle, because I think this could full well decide the game. The Utes, 9th in college football in rush yards. The Devils, 8th in rush yards against. They have the 8th best mark. 78.2 is the number against them in games. And I'll remind you, it doesn't feel like Arizona State has gone up quickly on teams. At least in my opinion, it's felt like they've been able to the opponent has been able to play their brand of football. It hasn't been, you're down 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, welcome to throwing the ball in the air. I think the most comparable team that Arizona State has seen this year when it comes to the rush game is Mississippi State, and how they stopped Fluff Bothwell and Devon Booth, especially because Mississippi State was the team that went up early in that game, and Mississippi State was able to play their brand of football. Parker, on 17 carries, they held those 2 running backs to a combined 67 yards. So I think if you get that sort of production from the ASU front 7, if you get that emphasis on those 2, now, Utah has a better rushing quarterback than Mississippi State does. But if you can shut down the Dogs, Parker, Rogers, those guys at the front line, and force, like we talked about in the previous segment, Dampier to go to the air and to make plays with his arm, that's how the Devils' defense is going to beat these Utes.
Do you think there's a concern, going back to that Mississippi State game as an example, there were 2 big chunk plays, both through the air, and it's because Arizona State, you felt like they were focusing on the running game when it was really, as you said, Fluff Bothwell and David Booth, that's who ASU was focusing on. It led to 2 big chunk plays Do you think if ASU focuses on the ground game too much, that Utah might be able to do more damage in the air like we saw them do against West Virginia?
I don't, because I don't worry about Ryan Davis and Larry Simmons outside like I do worry about Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans. The biggest concern for me in that capacity is Xavier Alford not playing this week and not having your safety blanket over the top. But Devils have dealt with that over the past couple of weeks. So, I mean, Kyle Whittingham's a very smart guy. He's a very great head coach. So I'm sure he'll have stuff ready. But I don't fear Simmons and Davis for the Utes like I feared the speed of Brennan Thompson and Anthony Evans in that Mississippi State game.
Utah, they rank 9th in rushing yards per game in the entire NCAA with 242.6 yards per game. And they run a triple option-like offense. It's a little bit of a mesh between an RPO system. But mainly it's a triple option. They like to use Tampier. And Aidan, can you talk about how hard it is to try and stop a triple option quarterback, especially one like Dampier, who, as we've seen, can really sling the ball when he's given the chance?
Absolutely. I mean, it constantly keeps the defense on their toes, and that's what Devin Dampier's been able to do all season long. When you have two elite running backs in your backfield alongside you, it maximizes Devin Dampier's ability with his legs. You see his numbers. He's a top 3 rusher on this team. You rarely see that from a quarterback, but it's just because of his ability to extend plays. And that's another thing. On broken plays, when Dampier can get out of the pocket, even if it's not designed, he can continue to keep a play alive, find a guy downfield. But Arizona State, if they want to take something out of another team's playbook, if they want to look at how do you beat Utah, well, one team has beat Utah this year, and it's Texas Tech. And the high rushing leader in that game was Rodgers with 37 yards on the ground. So they clearly stopped the run. They figured out how to manufacture their way to a victory. And he had 10 carries for 37 yards. That's only 3.7 yards a carry. If you do that, that's not only forcing Devin Dampier to throw the ball, but where else is Utah going to get offensive production? It starts with that. You stop the run, you win this football game, just as Alan mentioned a few moments ago.
Utah definitely has a multifaceted attack, but it seems to be led by the run, as you talked about, Aidan. And Utah has 1,213 rushing yards this season, but the number that pops out to me is they have 7 different ball carriers with double-digit carries. They really love to share the load. And Alan, can you talk about how hard it's going to be to try and stop this Utah running game when it seems like anybody on Utah's offense can carry the rock at any time?
Yeah, first of all, I think the hardest thing for me is going to be able to identify all 10 of these ball carriers as we go throughout the game. But one guy I do want to focus on is Nate Johnson. He's listed as a wide receiver on ESPN. This is a quarterback, running back, wide receiver. He played quarterback for the Utes 2 seasons ago, and then he went and spent a year at Vanderbilt. He said, I didn't like the Commodores very much. I'm coming back to Utah. So he transferred back in to be a Ute. He didn't play really against West Virginia, but he's got plenty of speed. He averages 6.2 yards per carry. They're comfortable putting him in as quarterback in that triple option. They're comfortable putting him in as that second option, third option. They've also got Bird Ficklin. The Utes have 3 quarterbacks who just have fantastic legs. Bird Ficklin this year is averaging 7 yards per carry. He scored 2 touchdowns himself. And, he hasn't thrown an incompletion on 8 attempts. So Utah's a very dangerous team no matter what of the 3 quarterbacks they put in the backfields. You feel confident with any one of them stepping back to throw the ball. I think that's going to be the biggest issue is sometimes you'll play teams with 2 quarterbacks, and when a second one is in, you know they're running the football. You can run cover 0. With this team, you can't. You can't see Bird Ficklin in the backfield and say, we're going to put 8 guys in the box and go man-to-man across the board, because he's going to burn you if he sees that and if Whittingham sees that. So I think that's my biggest concern is you've got 3 quarterbacks who can do it all.
ASU this season has forced 6 fumbles. And in that pivotal loss for Utah that we against Texas Tech that we talked about, they had 2 pivotal fumbles. And when it comes to this defense for Arizona State, who has to step up, force those fumbles, make the turnovers? I'm thinking the linebacker room. I'm thinking Jordan Crook, Keyshawn Elliott. They have to step up. What's y'all guys' thoughts on who has to step up on this ASU defense to try and make those big plays and force those turnovers?
Well, Keyshawn Elliott has been the engine all year, and I don't think that should change in a big game like this. He has been flying around the field. I feel like he's taken a huge leap from year to year as well. Last year it was Fiaseu and Elliott. They're running that back. They have Jordan Crook. This is by far their biggest strength with the entire defensive unit. And Keyshawn Elliott, too. I mean, when he's a point of attack defender, he gets there first. Everyone else comes with it. And Arizona State, as you mentioned, when they want to focus on forcing turnovers, it really does start with this linebacker core. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Keyshawn Elliott is the man, and he's not only been so good in college football, but he's now garnering attention to potentially play at the next level.
Yeah, I'll play devil's advocate here. I think the linebacker core is absolutely key, but looking at it from a Utah perspective, you already talked about their offensive line. Center Jaron Kump is in his second year as a Ute. He's a redshirt senior, plenty of college experience, 6'6", 315. Fano at right tackle, Lomu at left tackle. These are some of the best offensive linemen in the nation. So the importance of ASU's linebacker core, I think, turns onto an importance for Utah's offensive line, because I think whoever wins that second level, if the offensive line can get to that second level and force 7-8 yard gains, that's gonna be a nail in the coffin. Because when you get Devin Dampier on 2nd and 2, if you can get him looking deep and give him time, if there's nobody down there, he's just gonna run. He's gonna take it himself and look for 7-8 yards. So I think Kump, Lomu, and Fano across that offensive line, they're gonna be the key for Arizona State when it comes to beating and making sure that you win that second level.
But we've danced around this argument, it seems, this entire segment, and I want to talk about the trenches battles. Alan, you mentioned only 3 sacks that Utah's offensive line has allowed this year. Just a mouth-watering number, but I'll give you another mouth-watering number. Arizona State, 19 sacks this season. That leads the Big 12. Who wins the battle in the trenches? Because CJ Fight and Prince Dorba, they've made their names known. They're known to getting in the backfield. They're known for bringing pressure. Who's going to win this battle between the Utah offensive line and the Arizona State defense?
I think it's hard not to pick the Utah offensive line just because of the pedigree, but what Brian Ward has done with this defensive unit and scheming up pressures has been next level. I feel like he's taken a step each week. The best they looked defensively, especially at pass rushing the quarterback, was against TCU. Josh Hoover, for that entire second half, had no time, and when he had time, the throws were lackluster because of them being few and far between. So I would bank on Utah if we're talking about a comparison between the two, just because they've got the names, they've got the bodies. But this Arizona State defensive line is truly no joke. This is a powerful matchup.
When you go trenches on trenches, too, I think it's very important to look at Dallin Bentley, Lander Barton, J.J. Buchanan, the tight ends for Utah, because they love their tight ends. All 3 of those guys, you can mix in Otto Tia, the Utah State transfer who moved from wide receiver to tight end. Utah this year, they love their tight ends. Barton's another guy who plays both ways. He's a linebacker defensively and a tight end offensively. So these guys I think are going to be the difference. You have the known names, the talent for Arizona State. You have the known names and the talent for Utah's offensive line. I think the tight ends and their ability, because there aren't a ton of guys you can double team on this Arizona State team because there are so many you want to double team. So I think these tight ends and their ability to go one-on-one with maybe a Prince Dorba, maybe a Jordan Crook on the edge, I think is going to be the key.
Expect the trenches to be a very big battle this Saturday, as well as how the Utah running game will perform. When we return, we're not going to talk about the X's and O's. We're going to talk about the Kyles and the Kinneys as we break down the coaching matchup. We'll be right back after we take a quick step away for Station ID.
The following is an exclusive presentation of Blaze Sports.
Welcome back to Blaze Game Day. Time for the third segment of tonight's episode, or today's episode, I should say. And we are going to talk about the coaching matchup. Kyle Whittingham, a legendary name when it comes to coaching in the Rockies and coaching on the West Coast. And Kenny Dillingham, a young up-and-comer that had a great year last year, seems to be building a program in Arizona State. He was a great offensive coordinator, and he seems to be building a program and kind of activating the Valley like he's talked about, and building a culture similar to what Kyle Whittingham started at Utah. And Aidan, I want to talk about this coaching matchup. Can you give us a debrief on both of these guys?
Well, Kyle Whittingham is one of the best coaches in the country. He's a legend in the game. 21st season at the helm at Utah. And to describe it simply, he's been a model of consistency. When you want to define a program that year in, year out is successful, that is what Utah is. And Kenny Dillingham, he came into Arizona State, first year, did not succeed. Everyone wanted to start to kind of write him off. But then the next year, the second year at the helm, he did unprecedented things. He went to the Peach Bowl, dominating the Big 12, winning it in his first year, and the first year for ASU in the conference. And then in year two, they're picking up right where they left off. Both of these squads, they find way to win games. And when you just find ways to win, even when it's not pretty, that means that you have a good guy who's a leader of men that can lead these guys to the promised land, and that is what both of them provide. Kenny Dillingham has always talked about how Utah's a program he's admired, he's looked up to, and Arizona State is slowly but surely building towards that pedigree in the Big 12.
Yeah, Whittingham has been exceptional at Utah. They've made a bowl game almost every season he's been there. Last year, in fact, they went 5-7. It was their first year not reaching a bowl game in a decade. Despite all that success, they haven't won a bowl game since 2017, but continuing to be on that matchup. They've played in a couple Rose Bowls since then. It's been a team that, to put it simply, has just been the best team in the West, really, up until maybe Dan Lanning and these Oregon teams. It was pretty easy to bank on this Utah team being one of the best, if not the best, in the West. So I think Whittingham has done a fantastic job. Dillingham has been super complimentary of him in his recent press conference. He said that you're not playing a football team, you're playing a football program. And this is a team where guys will come in for a year, go on an LDS mission, or they'll transfer into, or you see a lot of guys who spend all 4 or 5 years of their college eligibility at this place because they have faith in what Whittingham has built, and he has such a history and such a resume to get guys in a world where everybody wants to leave to stay for 4 or 5 years.
And I think the key is the longevity of what he's been able to have and retaining you mentioned retaining players, retaining the coaches has been big for Kyle Whittingham, and he's been the coach of Utah since 2005. You talk about a statistical oddity in modern college football. We just saw Mike Gundy get let go. Nick Saban retired a couple of years ago. Kyle Whittingham, the last time he wasn't the head coach, Urban Meyer was the head coach of the Utah Utes. Since then, Urban Meyer, he's been the head coach of Florida, Ohio State, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and now he's on Big Noon. That's how long Kyle Whittingham has been a coach, and he's gone through the test of time for Utah as well. The Mountain West, the Pac-12, now the Big 12. And guys, what do you think the secret sauce is for Kyle Whittingham being in that position as long as he has?
Well, he's clearly doing something right, and I think that the biggest thing for me is in this modern landscape of college football with NIL and the ever-changing scenarios, he still is able to retain all these guys. So everybody is buying in. They're buying into what he's preaching, and that has resulted in this sustained success. Even coaches at the Power 4 level, if you have all the money in the world, it's difficult to keep guys for multiple years, 3 or 4 seasons. And Kyle Whittingham, even with the shift, he's seen both sides of it. He is still able to field a very consistent group year in and year out. And I think that just means that those internal conversations, whether it's practice or off the record, he knows how to get through to a college athlete, to a kid who's looking to make it at the next level.
And Aidan, that longevity doesn't just stop with his players. He's had assistants there for decades with him. His offensive line coach, Jim Harding, has been there for 12 years. His special teams coordinator, Sharif Shah, has been there for 14. Tight end coach Freddie Whittingham has been there for 10. Morgan Scalley has been there for a decade plus. And not only has Morgan Scalley, that's the defensive coordinator, been there for a decade plus, that's Whittingham's successor. It's already been named. In Scalley's contract, he's the head coach in waiting for the University of Utah. So I think when Kyle Whittingham says it's time to go, because I don't think the Utah athletic department will tell him it's time to go, and especially not anytime soon, I don't think Morgan Scalley's right there. And Morgan Scalley's going to come up. The Utah defense has been their pride and joy year in and year out for the last decade plus. That's in a large reason to Morgan Scalley, but I think Whittingham is just a fantastic leader. He's a fantastic coach. I think he's a great blend for that city and that place to get him to stay there for 22 seasons.
And before we get to Kenny Dillingham and how the start of his journey at Arizona State mirrors what Kyle Whittingham is doing, we talked about how Kyle Whittingham has been able to adjust to the modern era of college football. But let's talk about the adjustment Kyle Whittingham has had to do adjusting with play callers. A lot of people, when they think about Kyle Whittingham, I think about the Alex Smith era very early on in his career, and a lot of people might think about Cam Rising. Well, now Devin Dampier is an entirely new quarterback system, but it seems to be working, and it seems to be having the flash, having the style, having the numbers, more importantly, that Kyle Whittingham and his offense want. What does this adjustment just show to how great of a coach Whittingham is?
Oh, it shows everything. He's extremely adaptable. Cam Rising was a pocket passer who was very stagnant in the pocket and didn't move a whole lot. And Devin Dampier is the polar opposite. The modern NFL-style quarterback that can evade pressure and get out of the pocket and throw on the run and do all those amazing things, showing off his athleticism. But to adjust a playbook almost entirely, that is what's really unheard of and makes what Whittingham's doing that much more impressive.
I really liked last year. I think last year was a really good encapsulation of who Kyle Whittingham is, because you start the year with Cam Rising. Utah's a ranked team. They were the favorites in the Big 12 last season. You go through 4 games, they're 4-0. They just beat 14th ranked Oklahoma State on the road. Hype is so high. And then they lose to Arizona at home. And at this point, Cam Rising's no longer his quarterback. He's now got true freshman Isaac Wilson behind center. Come into Arizona State, you try Rising, it doesn't work. You lose by a possession on the road. And then down the rest of the way, they used 4 quarterbacks. They used Rising, they used Wilson, they used Rose, and they used Batari. They used 4 different quarterbacks down the stretch, and they weren't winning games. They lost 7 straight in the sandwich of that season. They played great teams. They played Arizona State on the road, TCU at home. Houston on the road by 3 is maybe the nitpicky loss where you could say you should probably go win that game. But then they play 9th-ranked BYU within a point at home, go on the road to Colorado, lose to 22nd-ranked Iowa State, who would go on to the Big 12 title by 3 at home. It was a very competitive Utah team, and Whittingham, through all the chaos that last season was, with 5 different quarterbacks trying new things, he found a way to honestly squeeze the best I think he possibly could have out of that Utah team.
Yeah, he definitely did, and what he's been able to do after last year's setback with all the injuries, it just shows the program that he has established, and it's going to be hard to get a win on him no matter the year, even if it's an off year like it was last year with all the injuries. Just what he's established. Utah's a tough team. Arizona State found that out last year. Even though it was a big win for the Sun Devils, it still was a tough game. 27-19, taking down the 16th-ranked Utah Utes at home. But to get to Kenny Dillingham, it's kind of funny. He's playing for his hometown. He's now coaching for his hometown team, Arizona State. You could say Whittingham's kind of doing that. He's an alma mater of BYU, and Whittingham, when you look at him and his career, I actually read a book that talked about a decision that he made back in that 2004-2005 era. BYU looking for a new head coach. Bronco Mendenhall eventually got the job at BYU, but Whittingham reportedly was offered the BYU position, but he chose to stick it out with Utah because that's where he had established his new roots. And I think that was a tough decision for him to make, but eventually finding a new home. And Kenny Dillingham, staying with his true home in Arizona State, did a great job offensive coordinating and coaching Memphis, Florida State, Auburn, eventually made his way to Oregon, and now at Arizona State. What have y'all seen from Dillingham that shows that he is following a similar track to Whittingham?
Well, he's all about loyalty. When he first got here, his intro press conference, he was bawling his eyes out, just so grateful for the opportunity. And Kenny Dillingham is all about that, about buying in and looking at the long-term plan. It feels, Parker, like Kenny Dillingham wants this to be a 10, 20, 30-year process with Arizona State. And he will get offered an NFL job at some point. He will get offered an SEC job at some point. He might already have. But it feels like no matter what the opportunity is, this is his dream job. He's here now, and he's taking full advantage. He has changed this program forever. The fact that we're here at this school right now is quite crazy. The history of ASU, now it's at its best that it's ever been because of Kenny Dillingham.
I think, just to butt in really quickly, they're both amazing leaders, I think, and that doesn't just show on the football field. It doesn't just show by how much their players love them. It doesn't show how much their fans love them. It doesn't, like, they're loved by everyone. I think being members of the media, that's the way I see it too. Dillingham is a fantastic head coach with working with media, talking with media. Kyle Whittingham is buying pizza for his media during press conferences. Like, they're fantastic leaders, and I think you can just see that by the way that everybody who seems to be around them seems to get better. And the energy they provide, the talent they have, the wisdom they have. And you say wisdom for a 35-year-old head coach here at Arizona State, but the way that they just lift everyone up around them, it feels, is just unheard of.
Kyle Whittingham, Paul Bear Bryant Coach of the Year Award in 2008, Mountain West Coach of the Year Award in 2008, a two-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year Award winner, and Kenny Dillingham, in his second year at Arizona State, the Big 12 Coach of the Year. High coaching pedigree, all coming to a head in Salt Lake City this upcoming Saturday for the Blaze Game of the Week. We have one final segment where we will break down the keys to the game, and then we'll give our game predictions. Stay tuned as we take a pause for Station ID. Welcome back for the final segment of Blaze Game Day. Parker Porrill here with Alan Judson and Aidan O'Neill, where we're going to talk about the keys to the game for both teams and talk about a couple playmakers that could be a huge difference maker. And obviously from the get-go, I'm going to open up the conversation with Jordan Tyson. I mean, what a monster he is. And something tells me this is going to be the story for every ASU game this season. It hinges on how well Jordan Tyson does. And we've even seen when teams bracket Jordan Tyson, it opens up the passing game for other guys to get involved. That's what we saw with Derek Eusebio against Baylor, who was kind of the hero of that game, along with Jesus Gomez, the kicker in that one. But Jordan Tyson, he's just a monster when it comes to in the slot, going out deep, really anywhere on the field he can find a reception. Are there any other playmakers that stick out to you guys?
Well, Jalen Moss being back is huge. I think with how much production Jordan Tyson has got to start this season, Jalen Moss will probably have a big role in this game. Jordan Tyson's had a touchdown in every single game this season. The question mark has been, how can other receivers get involved? Well, we saw Jaron Hamilton have a huge catch against TCU. Shimon Mateer has been much more involved in the offense. So they're able now with Sam Leavitt to spread the wealth more often. Leavitt had the best game of his season against TCU when you take everything into account. It feels like he always thrives when he's doubted. He started the season with these Heisman expectations, fell short for the first couple of weeks, and now is picking it back up. I expect no different this week at Utah. I think Leavitt's going to have another big game, and that entire offense is going to be a big factor.
I think give me Shimon Mateer. I think will be one of the biggest impacts on this game. The Devil tight end has really started to ramp up his production in the last 3 weeks. He has 16 catches over the last 3 weeks. He had 1 in the first 2. Last year against Utah, just 1 catch for him. But we've seen him explode at times, and we've seen him just get out into the flat, make the catch, and get some yards after the catch. And if he can do that, that's another thing that can open up the pass game for Jordan Tyson. But I think not only that, but it can open up the run game for the Devils as well, having a guy at the edge of the line who maybe instead of crashing hard, the linebacker has to take one thought. Is Mateer going out into the flat? Do I need to defend this tight end on this play so you don't get burnt. I think Mateer, the tight ends as a whole, Kamari Anderson, Cameron Harpole, I think are going to be a big impact in this one.
And getting to that tight end room, one of the guys who I think is going to be a sneaky playmaker for this game for Arizona State is Cameron Harpole. And you look at his numbers on the season, 4 receptions, 32 yards, no touchdowns, and you're just like, he's not really making a scene. But you look at the film, oh my gosh, can this guy block? He might only be 6'3", 250 pounds, which for a tight end, that's not really a monster, you could say, at least when it comes to some of the freaks we see out there today and their builds. But what he's able to do with that frame, it's insane. He is just such a beast when it comes to blocking, paving the way for the running game. He really is just a hard hat player for this Arizona State blocking and getting to this running game. We've talked about it all season long, the three-headed monster for Arizona State: Raleek Brown, Kyson Brown, Kanye Udo. They've seemed to be splitting reps. Kyson Brown did get dinged up a little bit against Mississippi State, slow to get back into the action, eventually finding his way back into the running mix. And Kanye Udo has kind of taken a step back a little bit, and Raleek Brown seems to be blowing the gates open and really leading the way when it comes to this running back room. Do y'all think that stays the same? Raleek Brown kind of the leader in this running back room going into Utah, or maybe they need Kanye Udo like we saw against Mississippi State?
I think Raleek Brown will continue to be the lead running back just because he's the leader in the Big 12 in rushing yards. He's came on the scene so effectively. One thing that I think will make Arizona State's red zone offense a lot better, that has been their worst part of their game by far, is the inability to score touchdowns when they get down there, is mixing in a Kyson Brown and Kanye Udo as a power back on second and short, third and short. Raleek Brown is a much more twitchy running back that works east to west. You need those guys that work north-south that are almost bowling balls through the offensive line that can get short distance first downs. They tried to use Raleek in that role against TCU. He got stuffed multiple times. So they still can keep this committee approach. They really didn't lose anything when they lost Cam Scadaboo with how good this running back unit is, as crazy as that sounds. But I would expect more Udo and more Brown, especially down near the red zone.
Yeah, this is the keys to the game segment, so I'm going to give mine right now, and it's the red zone. You talked about it, Aidan. Utah is fantastic in the red zone. 96% conversion rate this season. When they get in the red zone, they score. And 21 of their 24 red zone scores have been touchdowns. They find the end zone when they get inside the 20. They're so difficult to stop, whereas ASU, they've got an 86% conversion rate. They've gotten in the red zone 22 times. They've scored 19 of them, which sounds great, until you realize that they're near a 50-50 split in touchdowns and field goals. And that's not going to win games as you get into Big 12 play. So I think the red zone is going to be key. I don't think the running backs are what need to be focused on in the red zone. And I think the passing game needs to be opened up more, because once you can naturally contain Jordan Tyson to 20 or 30 yards of routes, he's easier to stop.
It's those fade routes, too. We saw it against TCU. When they get in the red zone, they're looking for that fade to Jordan Tyson, to Malik McClain, and it's not there. Is that what you see as the main crux of this red zone passing offense for Arizona State?
Yeah, I think that the passing offense, it's a key to football. Passing opens up running, running opens up passing. And the rush offense, as you talked about, Aidan, hasn't worked in the red zone, but I don't think that's the rush game's fault. I think it's the pass game's fault. The pass has not opened up the running game, and I think we saw the game tying touchdown against TCU was Jordan Tyson over the middle, and giving him space to put in the middle of the field and let him dictate his route. If the play starts to break down, that's when you're going to win games. And getting guys over the middle, crossing routes, little picks on the corner, something to disrupt the defense and put a ripple in the pool is going to be the difference. And I think throwing the ball in the red zone is the key for this game.
One of my keys, or as I should say, concerns for this game is if we take a flashback to last year. Of course, Arizona State with the big win over Utah, 27-19 at home. The fans stormed the field, but if we remember in that game, Sam Leavitt got injured, and he could not play in the next game against Cincinnati, which Arizona State lost 24-14, and that offense looked lifeless. And one of the big red flags that everybody has seen this season is Sam Leavitt, when he's out of the pocket, he's not really sliding all that much. He's not sliding well. He's taking some bad hits, and I for one, am worried that we're going to see history repeat itself on the road against Utah, as we've seen Sam Leavitt rely more on his legs and really take some gambles out there. I'm nervous for Sam Leavitt's health and what we're going to see happen last year happen again this year.
Yeah. No, he takes some big hits. He really has to work on sliding, getting out of bounds. Sam Leavitt a lot of times tries to do too much. He is one of the more talented quarterbacks I've seen in college football. When you think about how fast he is at the position, how elusive he is in open space, he has the arm, but he just needs to find the little intricacies. It feels like Caleb Williams on a lower level in college, and Caleb now in the NFL is struggling with this. When do I throw the ball away? When do I try not to make the big play after running around for 15 seconds? Those quick decisions, they come with time. But Sam Leavitt, it'll not only make ASU better, but it will keep him healthy, as you mentioned.
And not to raise your fears, Parker, about Sam Leavitt, but I don't know how we've gotten this far in the show without talking about John Henry Daly. The Utes edged 6.5 sacks this season, tied for the third most in college football. Even when Leavitt's in the pocket, he's going to be bared down upon on that outside. It's going to be a huge job for Arizona State's tackles, for Ihanacho and Atkins, to try and get to Henry Davis. And as you mentioned, a guy who's that good on the edge in Henry Davis might push Leavitt out of the pocket, and he's got to be smart when he gets out of the pocket. He's got to throw the ball. He's got to slide. He's got to do all the things you've talked about, Aidan, to keep the football in Arizona State's hands, because that's what these teams are both amazing at. It is time of possession. Both of these teams, they're first and second in the Big 12 in holding the football.
Now, I might be the president of the Jeff Sims fan club, but I, for one, would be worried if that's who Arizona State turns to with an absence of Sam Leavitt. Not because Jeff Sims is not a great football player. You see him at practice. He can throw the ball like no other. It's just this offense is so used to Sam Leavitt. And he is this offense, and we saw that last year against Cincinnati. And I don't want to go too simple here, but I feel like this game is really going to ride over the turnover battle. And we saw that go against Utah, against Texas Tech. We talked about it earlier. 2 fumbles, 2 interceptions. Arizona State has done a good job this season forcing turnovers. Do you see that repeating itself in this game, or do you see Utah actually forcing some turnovers, making Sam Leavitt uncomfortable?
Utah's pass rush is good enough to make Sam Leavitt uncomfortable, most definitely, with the edge that Alan talked about, and that unit is always one of Kyle Whittingham's strengths. But Sam Leavitt showed enough against TCU, which is also a very gifted football team, that I'm not overly concerned about the turnover issue going into a game like Utah. It's going to be a major key, and also how Arizona State can make Devin Dampier's life difficult. But no doubt, that is going to be an X factor and a department of the game where I believe Arizona State will win.
Well, Utah's really struggled with turnovers this season. They're 65th or so in the nation when it comes to turnovers. They've got a +1 margin. They've forced 7. Only one of those has come via fumble. And I think that's going to be a reason Arizona State relies on the run game, but putting more pressure on Sam Leavitt, I think he's a guy who's, when he throws interceptions, it's because he's under pressure. And it's because he's going wild. When he has time to sit in the pocket, survey the field, and try to lead his receiver, he's fantastic at it. He does a great job. So I think the pressure is going to be key in those turnovers that you talk about, Parker. I think if the Devils turn it over, it's going to come through the air.
We talked about our keys. We'll get to our predictions after we take a quick step away. But when we return, the Blaze Game Day predictions of the week.
The following is an exclusive presentation of Blaze Sports.
Welcome back to Blaze Game Day. We have our predictions coming up. Parker Porrill here with Aidan O'Neill and Alan Judson. Right out of the gate, I'm going to hit y'all with my predictions. I'm somebody who I'm up and down on the Devils this season. I've gone through my predictions, but I've really looked at the numbers. This is probably the hardest I've thought about a game prediction in quite some time. I've really looked at every possible scenario I can think of in my mind, and every number is telling me that Arizona State is going to have yet another squeaker. Arizona State seems to be the cardiac kids. We saw it against Baylor, saw it against TCU, had a close one not go their way against Mississippi State, And all last year, it seemed like Arizona State had close game after close game. And spoiler alert, I think we're going to have another close game in Salt Lake City. But make this one very interesting. 27-21, my final score. Arizona State takes down Utah. I do think the total number of points goes down if the storms hit and if they play through heavy rain or potentially some sleet. You never know. It's up in Utah. But I think this game is going to be 27-21. If there's some rain, I still think Arizona State comes out with the win, but I could see it being like a 17-13 score instead.
Arizona State is known for playing one-score games. I'm right there with Parker. I don't see a world where this isn't a one-score game. Utah has been great all season. Both of these teams match up very well, but I do have Arizona State winning this one 27-20. I was kind of right there with Parker on the prediction. Sam Leavitt is the X factor, as always, for Arizona State, going against Devin Dampier. Leavitt has outplayed him thus far this season. He's going to have to be that guy. Arizona State, though, that red zone offense, we can't harp on it enough. Whether it's the play calling improving, whether it's somebody else stepping up aside from Jordan Tyson, there's going to be a point this year where they have to just convert at a higher rate or it's going to bite them. I don't think it's going to bite them this week, though. I think they get it done and continue to prove that they're one of the top teams in the Big 12.
Yeah, one-score game. I have a one-score game as well. I think that the weather could play a factor. I think it's going to be very important. And when the weather comes to play a factor, the rush game is what's important. And the team with the best rush game, maybe in college football, is the University of Utah. I have Utah winning 28-23, defending their home turf. I think the Utes, their third down conversion rate is the biggest thing that turns me on to this team. They're 61.1% third down conversion rate. That is the second best mark in college football. They're 44 for 72. Devin Dampier and Sam Leavitt, I think, are very comparable quarterbacks when it comes to their legs. I think Leavitt's got a better arm, but I think Whittingham has a small edge on Kenny Dillingham, mixing those two up as well. But I think when it comes down to the run game, Utah's got the better run game. They've got the better third down conversion rate, and I trust Kyle Whittingham if and maybe when the Utes get a big lead, like it feels like most teams have on Arizona State. I trust Whittingham to keep it more than any other team they've faced this year.
Well, Alan definitely saved the graphic there. And spoiler alert, the Utah kid picked Utah. Not necessarily a Utah fan, though, but from the area. And
how could he not?
Yeah, how could he not, Aidan? And
they're favored by 6 points, too. The Utes are kind of heavy favorites.
I feel like that's way too many points when you think about how ASU has played as of late. Utah's coming off that win against West Virginia, but the last time they were at home, it was a sour taste. It'll be a really intriguing matchup.
You talked about the students at the game and how it's fall break, but I feel like we can't ignore it's a night game at Rice-Eccles Stadium. That it is going to be a raucous environment.
They're known as, the best home atmosphere on this side of the Mississippi. It's one of the toughest places to play. That place gets loud on third down, and there's a reason that Utah is very good on third down and their opponents aren't. And that reason could be the Utah defense. It's large part for that Utah defense, but that student section is amazing. I think the weather, as you guys mentioned, when was the last time Arizona State played a weather game? Cincinnati? Or not Cincinnati, Oklahoma State last year? Was that the last time they played a weather game? And they were maybe saved by the bell because they were up by so much at halftime when the weather came. I think Utah's too good. I think they're just what they have built there is too hard to beat when you travel on the road. Now, that being said, sorry, I'm going to continue my tangent. Utah yet to win a home Big 12 game. They have not won a Big 12 game at home as a member of the conference, so I think this will be their first.
It's going to be a very good game, and if any of our predictions are any hints, we think it's going to be a close one. Make sure you tune in to the Blaze Radio game of the week on Blaze Radio ASUX. Alan Judson, Nathan Kettlehut on the call with AJ Gonsalves producing. Should be a great one right at kickoff. Pre-game action as well. Make sure you're on the Twitter so you can tune in to all the action. But for this episode of Blaze Game Day, it's in the books, fellas. Alan Judson, Aidan O'Neill, the co-host, Parker Porrill saying so long, and we'll see you next time.